And welcome to Follow Everton. Today's show, I've got two very special guests. They've not come from too far, but they've got a lot to say. And first and foremost, I'm going to introduce them. I've got the wonderful Mike Gow with me. He's a business guru. And I've also got a wonderful Everton content creator with me for this special show. And his name is Martin. First of all, let's welcome these two in. Hi, Martin.
Hi, Ryan. How are you?
Good, thanks. And yourself?
Very good considering all the drama over the past week, but I'm just holding myself together. Just.
Glad to hear. And Mr. Gow, thanks for coming on. I believe you just had a
okay?
meeting with Lord Sugar and with Lord Sugar and Richard Branson, and you've taken 20 minutes out of your schedule.
That's my business guru side of me. I've got to meet with these people.
I'm glad I've been able to get you both on. I mean, obviously, your faces are Mike. You've been on once before, but generally, I'm not too sure whether our viewers would have seen you before. But I know you have. Why is
I think you may have just dropped out, Ryan. Sorry, I can't quite hear you.
Yeah, I can't hear anything there, Ryan.
Can you hear me now?
There we go.
Yeah, you can hear me. She's connected her AirPods. I'm live, and the AirPods in the other room are connected to my thing. I can't hear anything you're saying. Right.
Can you hear us now?
I can hear you now.
Yeah, that seems to be fine. That's sorted everything.
Can you hear me at all?
Yes.
Yeah, you're very, very quiet. I think my girlfriend's buggered up my stream with trying to connect their AirPods. Okay, so I'm gonna have to start again and regain some composure. I've got Martin with me today. He's a content creator. He's a big Everton fan, and I've got Mike Gow, and both bringing a different edge to the stream. Martin, first and foremost, 10 points widely condemned across the board here and everywhere. And today we saw that one of the Liverpool MPs have actually written and wants to put a motion in Parliament to try and get this 10 points deduction as a minimum suspended. What's your immediate reaction to that? Is that just?
I think it is just, and it's positive to feel the support from the local MPs. I think it's probably something they were feeling from their local constituents, so they were feeling the pressure from the local area, and they've done something about it, and we have to applaud them. To be fair, whether it will transpire to actually to mean anything, will it be meaningful in terms of will it get to Parliament? Will it be debated? I'm not too sure. Early day motions, there's a huge amount of them that's generated every single week, day, month. Just in the month of November, I think there's 83 early day motions already submitted. So there's a huge amount that go through the process. So whether it will be heard, I'm not too sure. But that initial feeling to feel that we are supported within the local MPs, only 13 MPs have currently signed up to it. So I would really ask everyone who's watching to contact their local MP. I've done it myself. Derek Twiggs, my local MP, I've written to him and I've put an email out this afternoon to say, please get behind this motion. And let's just see where it goes.
Exactly. I mean, there's no rivalry in this, Mike. You'd hope that across the government, that individual MPs will put any footballing agenda, personal beliefs to one side and actually just support Everton in this. Mike, how far could this go, or do you think this could be just a case of MPs being seen to try and do something, but actually knowing that there probably isn't anything that anyone can do about it?
Well, no, I mean, I think the implications of this are actually quite significant for the very simple reason that in the King's speech, we've got this policy that's going to be put before the House of Commons for debate. So in the King's speech, the football regulation bill was essentially put forward and proposed, and this has cross-party support. So generally what happens when you've got a law that all sides of the House agree on, if there's a general election coming up, that is going to get debated and passed before the next general election comes round. So the predictions is that we are going to have debates throughout the next 12 months in the House of Commons, looking to debate, adjust, amend this bill, and we will see how this independent regulator of English football, what powers are going to be invested in it. So this is likely going to happen before the next general election, which at the absolute latest can happen in January 2025. But governments don't tend to like winter general elections because of the weather. Keeps a lot of voters at home and what have you, especially Conservatives who have a lot of elderly voters. So they might want to be calling it a bit earlier than that. We don't know. So it could be September. I would imagine somewhere between September, October, and January is the absolute latest that can happen. So September, October 2024 to January 2025. So what's going to happen with this now being discussed in Parliament is you've got guys like Ian Burn, my own MP, Kim Johnson, who's MP for Princes Park, has also put comments forward. This is going to be discussed in the House. And I think that the discussion is going to expand beyond Everton's particular sort of points deduction here to ask questions about the need for an independent regulator of English football.
Yeah.
So, I think, if the Premier League had not been so harsh, 4 points, 6 points, would this have happened? Possibly not. But the severity of it, they may have overstepped the mark here to the point where it's going to hurt them, because they are desperate to avoid an independent regulator of English football taking over the top tier. They want to continue to police themselves. So it's something that we definitely have to keep an eye on, no question.
I mean, loads of people watching. Thank you. Welcome to the show as well. As you can see, I've got two fantastic guests. Martin, on what Mike has just said there, he makes a really good point. In trying to prove that we don't need an independent regulator, what they've actually done is it not shown we absolutely do need an independent regulator, because it's like putting a little kid who runs into the sweet shop and he nicks a few chocolate bars, and of course he's done something wrong and he needs to learn. But if you go and stick him in 6 months youth offenders, it's completely over the top, isn't it? And proven that you do need to have some proper law and order regulating this.
Absolutely, they couldn't have got it any further wrong, could they? It's way off the scale, and they've sort of just ran out in the street with a big beacon on their heads just to flash to everybody that we need an independent regulator. They've really made the case known. It's unfathomable how they've come to this decision, how wrong this feels and is. And one thing I was thinking, we're in the bubble, the Everton bubble, if you will. We're looking on social media, we're talking about it every day. It's a major issue to us because we love Everton so much. But I was thinking, how is it for other fans of the Premier League? Are they feeling the same noise that we're feeling? Are they hearing it? Are they talking about it daily? And I just spoke to a few of my contacts throughout the country who I work with. And it's not just Everton fans discussing it, which is really interesting. It's the wider Premier League fans. And as you can probably hear on talks, it shows like TalkSport, etc. It's a main focus. So it's not just Evertonians feeling that the Premier League got this completely wrong and an independent regulator needs to come in. It's countrywide and everybody's talking about it. They couldn't have got it more wrong.
That's the beauty of it, though, isn't it? That the fact that everyone is talking about this. You do see. I mean, I know you're both active on Twitter. I know, Mike, you're not so fond on Twitter as well, really. But at the same time, you do see the power of it. You do have your core football trolls that are laughing at Everton, that think it's a big joke. Ha ha ha! Look at you, 10 points deducted for a 20 million overspend, which you would have been able to possibly disregard had one of your players not been suspended by the FA. So they kind of see everything as one big joke, but generally, if you look at the wider footballing community, they are shocked by this, and they are in disbelief. Mike, I know you've been looking at some of the due diligence involved here. You have one of the solicitors for Leeds United actually on the commission. Is that correct? Is there some bias going on?
So not solicitor, the barrister. So the head of the independent commission is a chap called David Phillips, KC, King's Counsel. He is with a chamber, a very famous chamber. He's been a barrister since 1976. This guy is extremely, extremely well thought of. But there's this issue that people are saying that he's worked for Leeds United, right? Now, he's a barrister. He's not worked for Leeds United. He has represented Leeds United in a tribunal 15, 16 years ago. So there's no, so the idea that there's a sort of a conflict of interest, this is a common misunderstanding when it comes to bar members, that because they've had some kind of professional engagement with a client in one area, that gives them some interest in the outcome, and that's not the case at all. So when we look at the bar, when we look at barristers, this is one of the strictest controlled, most highly regulated professions on the face of the earth. Okay, if they do anything that steps out of line, they can be found to have caused what's called professional embarrassment. Now, professional embarrassment is where you don't do your job properly. So, if you're, if you're stacking shelves at Tesco and, you put all the sort of out of date items at the back and you put the newer ones to the front, right? You're not doing your job properly. There's a bit of professional embarrassment there. You're going to get your line managers going to have a go at you, but the consequences aren't severe. But for barristers, that is not the case at all. If they do not conduct themselves in absolutely the most professional manner and the most objective manner at all times, then the consequences can be incredibly serious. So a conflict of interest would be where, in order to argue this case, they would be privy to information from the other side. So, and that would give them perhaps a conflict of interest, that they were privy to the other side's arguments. That would be a professional embarrassment if they went in and represented that. Or if they, for example, had a relative on the other side that stood to lose if they were to win the case, that would be seen as a conflict of interest. But this definitely isn't. It definitely not.
Morally, where does that? Morally, I see you don't have any issue with that though. But there was the West Ham. There was a guy heavily involved in West Ham. Ironically, was something to do with the Javier, the Mascherano transfer and all that.
So this is Nick Ego. So he was from 97 to 2012. I think he was financial director of West Ham for about 15 years. And actually, he was the guy that flagged this and reported it to. He was the guy that flagged the contractual irregularities and took it to the Premier League. But he's not there. He's not with West Ham anymore. He is there because he has expertise in the financial matters. And there was actually a case, I think it might have been the EFL versus Birmingham City case, where one of the complaints that Birmingham had was that there was nobody on the disciplinary panel who had any expertise in finance and accounting. So, they're sort of screwed if they do and screwed if they don't. You can't just appoint anybody. It's got to be somebody who has expertise in sports arbitration. So there's three members. They've got David Phillips, KC. He's got 50 odd years, nearly 50 years of experience as a Queen's Counsel / King's Counsel. So he's had, probably 15 years before that as a junior barrister. And then you've got Nick Ego, who is incredibly well experienced. Nick Igo, I think. Sorry, Igo. Nick Igo. He's very
Nick
well.
Ego. John
and then you've got the third person is a former circuit court judge. So, very well experienced circuit court judge. So you've got three people there that not only have expertise in the actual issue that they're being asked to adjudicate on, but also probably a century of legal arbitrage going on there with the KC and the judge. So you couldn't really get a better panel. Whether it's good from our point of view, and I think this is it. We're kind of sort of looking for things to sort of pick up and highlight as unfair, but this just is not the case. And to give you another example of this, right? So we'll sort of set another example of this, which I don't think many people are aware of. So I'll just go back and have a look. I've just got a couple of notes here. Let me get these up on the screen.
I appreciate this, Mike, because I thought you might have come on and said, no, it's corrupt. No, it's... I mean, I think we
That's what I'm here for.
Listen, I am fighting with every single sort of breath that I take not to be absolutely raging about this. But, I'm trying to be objective. I'm trying to see what the arguments are without too much emotion in there. Obviously, like any Everton fan, I'm absolutely livid about this. I haven't been off my phone or laptop since Friday. It was my birthday on Friday, by the way. I was on the
birthday.
What a birthday.
Yeah,
unhappy birthday.
Worst birthday present ever, 10-point deduction.
Yeah. I wish you could take 10 years off, though.
Well, yeah, there you go. Yeah,
can I ask you something then? I mean, you made some really, really good points. I like what you're doing, and I think this comes from your background, in work as well. Ability to look at the bigger picture and be rational about things. Whereas perhaps me and Martin, I'm not reading too much into Martin, but we look at this purely from the fan's perspective. We've been hard done. Yeah. So I think we can all agree the severity of the punishment is extreme. But Mike, what you're saying is actually it probably isn't corrupt. You've had a very strong panel of commissioners in terms of their experience and background, and maybe the angle we need to fight it is not against the legal sort of aspects of it, is more to do with the severity of the punishment.
Right. So that I absolutely agree with. So you can appeal on the basis that the sanction was not severe, but that it's excessively severe. So this is something that I expect our legal team will put forward, because in the judgment they make reference to a case which was the English Football League versus Sheffield Wednesday, and they appealed. The grounds for they had submitted 2 grounds for appeal, and also that the sanction was excessive. And Sheffield Wednesday had their 2 grounds for appeal were both rejected by the appeals panel. They were originally given a 12 points deduction, but the appeals panel found that the sanction was excessive and gave them and reduced it to 6 points. And that was in, I think, 2019, 2020. 2020, I think that was when the judgment was. So those points were taken off in the 2020, 2021 season. But just going back to this other point, right, on this, is it corrupt? There are massive questions about the competency with which this has been handled and the basis upon which the independent commission has arrived at this 10 points. And I think that is what we're going to see Everton challenge on. And there's a couple of reasons for that. But before I go on, just coming back to this sort of corruption. So yeah, we've got people saying, Richard Masters, total dick, hate him. And then you've got, right, the head of the commission. He's, worked for a rival who stands to benefit. Then you've got Nick Igo, used to work for West Ham. You're responsible for the Tevez Mascherano sort of nonsense going on there. But these are, this is not evidence of corruption at all. If I was to tell you, right, in our case, our legal team, we've got a barrister and a junior barrister. So
we've got Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck. The sloth from Bilderberg.
These guys are good. These guys are seriously good. So James Segan, King's Counsel, he's our senior barrister. And then we've got Celia Rooney. So she is our junior barrister. And they are both with a chambers in London called Blackstone, right? Now, the Premier League, they've got a guy called Adam Lewis, King's Counsel, and they have a junior barrister called Jason Pobjoy. And they are both also with that same chamber. They work for the same barrister firm. They work in the same chamber in London. Now, if you told that to most people, you would say, well, how on earth can these guys represent both sides? They both work for the same company, but this is not how the bar works. The bars, we have solicitors. Our solicitors are Pinsent Masons. Their solicitors are Linklaters. And then they put together the case. They put together the case and all the evidence and all the arguments. And then they seek the services of a barrister to represent us in the tribunal, in the specialist tribunal, which is this independent commission. So, you know, it's a world that the world of tribunals and what have you, and certainly the world of the bar. If these guys don't operate to the highest possible standards, not only can they be accused of be found sort of guilty of professional embarrassment, but they could be disbarred if they do not come forward when there's a knowing conflict of interest. There's no.
Is there a judge involved in all of this as well, Mike?
So we don't have a judge as such on the tribunal, and I think this is the other thing that confuses a lot of people. This is not a trial in a criminal court or a civil court. So in a criminal court, you just have to convince one member of the jury that you didn't do it, and then you need a unanimous verdict in order to convict, right? In a civil court, the burden of proof is less high, so you just have to have a majority. Yeah. So you have to have a majority decision there. So, but this is not a trial. There's no jury here. There's no jury of 12 footy fans from other clubs, etc.
I'm glad you're explaining this, by the way, because I think a lot of our viewers will be benefiting from this information. It's fascinating, but that's how we tend to look at these issues. We think that this is a legal. We've got lawyers, so it's a legal problem, right? But it's not a court. It's a tribunal. So in a court, it's what we call an adversarial system under common law. So you have a jury. Their job is to make up their mind and decide whether somebody's guilty or not guilty. And then you've got the prosecution. They put forward the case against, and the defendants who tried to get their client off, basically. And all the cases are put forward, and then the jury decides. But that's not what happens here. We haven't got a jury. What we've got is 3 expert members appointed to this independent commission, and their job is to listen to the Premier League's case, to listen to Everton's case, and then to adjudicate and decide which aggravating factors count that the Premier League and which mediating factors count, which Everton have put forward. And then they will come to a decision. So it's not about whether we're guilty or not. We've already admitted that we've okay. So on that, just because there's so many different things, independence does not necessarily mean impartial. So the corruption brigade are going to say that Richard Masters has been handed, and all these people have been handed some brown envelopes. So when they get there, when they've got to make their decision, they are influenced in one way or another. You also made a last point there. I don't know if you can repeat the last thing you said.
There was quite a few things, right? So
yeah, okay.
So
that's a really good point there. But I wanted you talked about these mitigations then, okay? And this is where I want Martin's opinions as well. They've said that there's interest on the stadium build, okay? Again, that's kind of like why is that? You've got to understand the business side of things. Have either of you got anything actually to elaborate on the interest on the stadium build?
I can, but Martin, do you want to have a crack first, or
you can pass? I can give you the next one, Martin. Actually, about Sigurdsson.
Give me. Okay. Go do that.
Yeah.
Sorry,
so these, I think this is probably the one that certainly the one that I've had most difficult to get my head around as well. So on the let me just see. Let me get these notes up again. There's so many notes, honestly, on this stuff.
By the way, I do see all the comments. We'll come to them, but I want to tickle these boys' brains. I want Martin more on the football, emotional side of things. I want Mike more on the sort of the business technicalities and the legal.
Before we move off the panel as well, Mike, we may come back to this, but I'd actually like to know, we know there's a wealth of experience, as you mentioned, on the panel, the Independent Commission panel, but who's actually responsible for appointing them? Does that go through a process in the Premier League? Is it one person who appoints them? How does that work?
Right. So the Premier League has a guy who is the chair of their Judicial Panel. His name is Murray Rosen. He's also an extremely experienced barrister at King's Counsel. And
How much is Mike being paid to come on?
you know,
How much are they paying you today, Mike?
I'm just a livid Evertonian. I'm doing it for nothing because
Yeah, Mike will be in the Bahamas next week. You'll see his picture change at the back.
Yeah. I honestly, man, honestly, it's I just haven't looked. I mean, actually, I changed a lecture that I gave today on global marketing management, looking at external business environments, and I changed it to look at at the Everton case, so we can look at what's happened in Ukraine and steel prices and all this different stuff. To actually teach the students about you don't have any control over certain things, but the standard business risks. That stuff. Anyway,
yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah, okay.
So how was this panel appointed? Right. So we've got on the Premier League. There's a guy called Murray Rosen, KC. He's a barrister, but he is the chair of the Premier League's Judicial Panel, and his job is to appoint an independent commission. So the reason behind this is because if the Premier League have control over the adjudication of a disciplinary case against one of its clubs, and they are also the prosecution, there is no way on God's earth that we can ever have a fair outcome. It's like that clip in Blackadder where Stephen Fry asks, pass me the black hat, I'll be needing that, because he's sort of judge, jury, and he's a witness in the trial. So we need to have some separation there, right? But so this, I mean, and this is standard. This is a pretty standard thing in terms of appointing a panel independently. And it's independent because that panel does not have to do anything the Premier League tells it. And what they have to do is look at the regulations that the Premier League have drawn up, look at the case that the Premier League put forward against Everton, look at the defence that Everton put forward, and then they have to make a decision on the extent to which there was a breach and how they are going to calculate that sanction, the severity of that breach and the sanction that can be passed. So that's how that panel gets appointed. Now, if you look at...
What's to say that Murray Rosen hasn't just picked people he knows are going to go with what his agenda is, which is the 12 points that the Premier League recommended. I mean, what's to say there is? I mean, it's all...
Are these drinking buddies?
Well, look, but this is the thing: is they're barristers, right? They cannot. The level of control that is put over barristers and the level of scrutiny of things of what they do in their professional conduct is just it's stratospheric. So there's no way on earth a barrister is going to take on a case that is going to put their professional career, because they could be disbarred. It could end them ever practicing law again, effectively. So so I understand what it's kind of like doctors with the Hippocratic Oath. They operate to certain ethical standards, and that's the driving force. If you look at accountants as well, management accountants, financial accountants, they cannot discuss any sensitive information with any family members, anything like that. They've got to keep everything very, very strictly under wraps, and they've got to operate in the most professional manner possible because of the sensitivity of the job that they do. So, but
are we clutching at straws? Are we clutching at straws when we're talking? When me and Martin are there, replying to every Premier League post on Twitter with the corruption logo, are we just clutching at straws and trying to create something that perhaps doesn't exist to try and engineer pressure on them?
Right. Okay. I'm sort of a bit conscious that I'm doing all the talking here. I'll give Martin the chance to sort of speak on these things. But right, let me give you another example. Right. So when it comes to the Manchester City's case, right, Murray Rosen, the head chair of the Judicial Panel, he has appointed himself to be chair of this independent commission, right? I think that he's going to be leading that independent commission. And Manchester City had a problem with this and objected to it because Murray Rosen is an Arsenal fan, right?
Yeah, just reading that now.
Just wait for this because it gets better. They then, Man City then take on one of the top tribunal arbitrators in British law. A guy, he sits in the House of Lords, a guy called Lord Panic, if you can believe that. Pannick, Panic. And the Man City fans actually created a banner. They said "Panic on the streets of London," sort of, goading the Premier League, saying you might have Murray Rosen on yours, but we've got Lord Panic. But Lord Panic is an avid Arsenal fan as well. So they've kind of sort of put in this complaint, and then they've gone out and hired this guy who charges somewhere between 5 and 10 grand an hour. If he's towards the upper level of that, there's somebody who did the calculations. They figured out, he's going to be on roughly about the same wages as Kevin De Bruyne when he's fighting their case due to the amount of hours he's putting in. It's going to be about 400 grand a week. So, but they objected to Murray Rosen on the basis he's an Arsenal fan, and then they went and hired a judge who's an Arsenal fan. We've got our King's Counsel is from Blackstone Chambers. The Premier League King's Counsel is from Blackstone Chambers. I mean, this is how to represent somebody in court or represent somebody in front of a tribunal, you need to have a barrister. There's only 4,000 of these people in chambers in London, so there's not a huge amount of barristers around the country, and they're in very short supply. But that's they are incredibly professional people that have to conduct themselves according to a very, very strict code of regulation.
Yeah. Okay. So the bottom line to our viewers, if you think it's corrupt, as Mike's probably saying, it probably isn't corrupt. But Martin, we have got a case that we want to put forward about the severity of this. How can you disregard some of these very important mitigations? I'm going to talk to you. This is an open and frank discussion. There's no one regulating. And if either of you do have to leave at any point for personal reasons, then there's no time obligation of you to sit through this. But player X, okay, player X, Gylfi Sigurdsson. We know it's Gylfi Sigurdsson. He cost us £45 million. I believe he was a very successful player for Everton over a number of years. 8 goals, 5 assists the season before, and then all of a sudden he's suspended. We don't need to talk about the ins and outs of what he was accused of, but what we do know was that the FA said to Everton, we were instructed to suspend this player. That's taken out of our control. How is that then not taken more seriously? Because that player has got a value. That player could have potentially played for Everton for that full season, resulting in a higher finish, resulting in more revenues, resulting in less negatives on the books. How is that not being taken into consideration? And now they're arguing back that we should have sued him. But how can we sue him for something that he's been, he's not been convicted of? Martin, floor's yours.
Yeah. Again, it doesn't make sense, and this is why a number of points on the Premier League report. Where I was reading it, the 41-page report on Friday evening with a glass of wine, I was scratching my head, and the more I drank, the more confusing it became. So, for player X, Gylfi Sigurdsson. So we suspended Gylfi in 2021, July 2021. Actually, we suspended him in August 2021, beg your pardon, by the FA. The FA basically said you have to suspend this player. So Everton's mitigation was it resulted in poor performance. Gylfi Sigurdsson was an influential player for Everton. Now, I know he had his doubters and his critics, but don't all players go through that phase at a certain time during the career, especially an Everton career. But I actually thought Gylfi Sigurdsson was influential in the Everton side. I thought he worked hard, and I think he would have been a key player for that upcoming season. Now, he would have influenced the team. He would have scored more goals. He would have made assists. Everton would have moved up the table. It is my belief that Everton would have finished higher with Gylfi Sigurdsson in the side that season. Now, I understand it may be down as a business risk, as you may lose players due to a number of factors, throughout the season, and I'm sure there are lots due to injuries. But this was taken out of Everton's hands somewhat. We had no say in it. And the point, as you've just said, Ryan, where the Premier League, we aren't really being given any credit for not pursuing a legal case against Gylfi Sigurdsson. I don't really understand what that legal case would have been, because, as we've said, Gylfi Sigurdsson is an innocent man in terms of the law. So what exactly would we be suing Gylfi Sigurdsson for? It was not, well, it's a difficult subject to get into, but he would claim it was not his fault. He was arrested, therefore he had no he couldn't influence whether he played for Everton that season or not. So again, I'm not too sure what that was going to be. I'm not too sure if Everton deep down, I can argue till I'm blue in the face because I am an Evertonian, that it should have been heard and it should have been, taken into account for more by the independent commission. But deep down, did Everton just put that in the case? Was that part of their case just because it happened that season? Just because it happened between that time period? Did they actually believe that was going to, sway a decision? I'm not too sure. I think it was just part of a number of factors during that time period, and they thought we'll throw that in as well because if those don't work, this might. It's a difficult situation. I can see both sides on this one. This one I think is more arguable. I can see both sides, and I can see how it could have been given for Everton, and ultimately it wasn't. But I think that they came down. It could be a business risk, and we lost Gylfi for the season. And that's it really. But I'm disappointed in the Premier League stance that we should have pursued because I don't understand what that would have looked like.
And what they've said basically, and I think this is the case with a lot of the mitigations. I'll move on to another one now, to do with the war in Ukraine. They've basically gone tough. We've said, okay, we've had to suspend one of our best players, who would have had an impact for us based on his historical record at the club and at Swansea before. We can ascertain he would have possibly won us another 6 points, which might have taken us to. They're basically gone, it's all hypotheticals, tough. And the same with the war in Ukraine. How can you account for the potential of a war on a sovereign country? I mean, Mike, do businesses take this? Do they expect, do they anticipate this to happen? Or are the Premier League just being very, very harsh with the way they've looked at Everton's case when it comes to the war in Ukraine?
Oh, God, that's the right question, that is. So
I gave it to you, not Martin.
Right.
So
let's put Everton hats on for the moment. We're Everton, and what we're saying is that this hit our club way harder than it hit anybody else, right? Everybody else, all other clubs, yes, they might have had electricity bills going through the roof because of this, like we all did, every single one of us. But with us, because of the sponsorship and potential investment that we would have had not from Usmanov directly, but from companies under his purview, shall we say. We're talking about things like stadium sponsorship, Finch Farm sponsorship. So it was Megaphone, USM. These are the companies that were looking to sponsor Everton. However, the interesting thing about this is there's actually two parts to this whole commission. So the first part is we submitted our accounts on the 1st of March. We then submitted our PSR calculations on the 2nd of March. On the 24th of March, the Premier League came back with their case saying, here's why we think you're over. And they said you're 120.8 million. And then Everton on the 24th of April, I think it was, they submitted their response saying, we think 87.1 million. And then on the 26th of May, the commission came back with its findings and requested the two sides to amend their cases. I think that was 2 days before the Bournemouth game. So can you imagine if we'd been hit with the points deduction there, they hadn't asked for these cases to be amended? I mean, there was no chance of this ever getting done by the end of last season. I think that's another thing that a lot of fans.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that in a moment.
Okay. So sorry, I've lost my train of thought on this. So we have this timeline, but in the first case, there were only 4 mitigating factors put forward by Everton, and in the revised amended case, there were 6. So, and one of them was Ukraine. So I think exactly what Martin's just said. You can see both sides of the player X. I could give you the devil's advocate argument on that, certainly as well. But they're not. What they're doing is they're not appealing on one thing. Remember what they're trying to in the second part of the case. In the first one, they said we're not. Everton said we're not in violation of this. In the second part, they said, all right, we are in violation. But what they're trying to do here is they're trying to whittle down the extent to which they're over that threshold, so that the punishment then becomes less severe. So they are kind of, as you said, Ryan, clutching at straws with this. But this is a standard business risk, right? You cannot legislate for wars breaking out. And in the world we're in today, we've got a globalized economy. All the international economies of the world are interconnected. Yes, Everton might operate solely in the UK, but it's in a very internationally connected industry. The finances obviously comes from sources all around the world. And while this has hit us hard, the panel don't deny that. The independent commission don't deny that.
So basically what they're saying is, tough, you chose to get sponsorship from a Russian company. That was the risk you took when you signed that agreement. And as a result, it's no one else's fault but your own to undertake that risk. Have we got more of a leg to stand on perhaps with the COVID, or is that more of the same? Because the way I see it, and I'll ask this to Martin, everyone was affected by COVID. It wasn't just us, but we seem to think that we are special in our approach to dealing with it. Is that just Everton again, clutching at Mike? I can see you're itching to speak again.
No, it's really what's that, and I can come because I think the sort of rejections are quite connected. It'd be easy to go through them quickly. So talk about the other mitigating. So you talked about COVID. So this is the player Y issue. Is that right?
Yeah, we wanted to sell. I think it was Michael Keane, but then we gave him a 5-year contract because he was playing all right under Ancelotti.
Yeah,
and they're saying that we
nearest to who it was. I thought it might have been DCL because although he signed a new contract in March, that contract wouldn't have come in until the 1st of July because it ran for 5 years, 1st of July until the 30th of June. In a couple of years' time, I think it is. So, yeah. But yeah, it could be Keane. But the thing that made me think it was DCL was in the document. It said they tried to claim that this had cost us $43 million in 43 million pounds in lost transfer revenues, and the vast majority of it was down to player Y. I can't see, if we were going to sell Michael Keane, were we really going to get back what we paid for him, or anything near what we paid for him?
But the market was Great point, Mike. Martin, the market was extremely inflated before COVID. As I say, we paid 45 million for Gylfi Sigurdsson, we paid 30 million for Yannick Bolasie, and then obviously everything's changed. So we've invested a lot. What we've done is we've taken a massive gamble to try and breach the top 4 or the top 6, invested a load of money. It's not worked out. And then when we're trying to recuperate some of that money, the players just aren't worth anything anymore.
I think it just highlights our poor business over the years. Paying inflated fees for players who probably don't justify that amount of money. Sergio Bolasie, I know there was an element of misfortune with injuries, etc. But again, for anyone to buy, if it was, we're talking about Michael Keane, if that is the scenario, I mean, I don't even think the Saudis, with all the money that they've got, would buy Michael Keane right now. So I think one of the things that I picked up on the report regarding player Y was the fact that he wasn't on internal lists to be sold. And I think that was debated on the commission as well. But I think it was explained that we have our internal lists and we have that within our internal departments of who we're likely to sell, and that will be within the strategic report. But then player Y was on Bill Kenwright's personal transfer list. Now, I didn't know Bill Kenwright had a personal list, but I assume it looks like that he had, and he was dealing solely with that transfer. So again, it's how Everton are run, isn't it? What other club operates in such a way that the chairman has one list and the internal departments have another? And unfortunately, it looks like Bill wasn't able to get that over the line for whatever reason that may be.
You reap what you sow. I mean, Mark, it's completely laughable. It's like me saying I've got my own list here. I've got my own list of players that I want to sell at Everton. Ashley Young being at the top right now, but it's quite of a fantasy. And you could say that a lot of these mitigations, yes, you have some sort of some reasoning, but if we all came to the conclusion that we are probably chancing it slightly, I mean, I'll come to you. I'll ask for your verdict on the mitigations one by one, and then I'll move on to a couple of other points. Martin, out of 10, how strong are our mitigations in your opinion?
I don't personally like our mitigations. I think we can debate them all day long. And look, I'm saying this as I can see both sides of the arguments on both things as well. I want to stick with Everton, but I think some of the mitigations are weak. I think they could have been presented better. You know, you can only read so much on a page as opposed to how they were presented. But I think it was an element of let's just throw and see what sticks. And if we can get 2 of these mitigations through, then fantastic. We may just be within FFP. So in terms of anything going forward, I don't think we should be arguing mitigations back with the Independent Commission via appeal. I think we just should be talking about sanction and whether the sanction was justifiable. In my opinion, it's certainly not.
Okay, so are we both concluding that the mitigations are a pile of rubbish? The same board members that we wanted rid of, who got us into this mess, you know, we can't actually then change our tune and start defending their mitigations of why possibly things went wrong, and we should solely focus on the sanction of it being too harsh. And just before I ask you about that, I want to ask Mike, Everton changed their plea late. Do you think, this is a theory, okay, the Premier League, and this links into a dual question, the Premier League wanted this dealt with last season under pressure from other clubs, okay? Now, that's where a lot of there's an agenda against Everton. They wanted rid of us because we would have been relegated last season. We would have had no chance for an appeal, and that would have been Everton in the Championship on 25 points, I think. At no point, an appeal would have been useless because there's no point retrospectively giving us 5 points in the Championship. They wanted rid of us. So that is one argument from the core Everton fan base. They were trying to get us out. They wanted to expedite it last season. Do you think, I'll ask you for your opinion on that, but also do you think once Everton knew that it wasn't getting heard last season, Everton fought it last season, fought against the allegations to try and get this postponed and pushed back from certain death last season to this season where they know they have time for an appeal, and that's why late in the day they changed their plea to guilty? Or do you think there's another reason? Appreciate there's 2 questions there.
Right,
Martin, I'll come straight to you after on the back of Mike. You come straight in.
So I don't think so. I think that Everton, in the first instance, genuinely looked at their calculations and thought that they wouldn't have submitted these calculations. They had us at 87.1 million, I think it was the figure, when they submitted the case in April. So they thought that they were below it, but they'd calculated a lot of things that the Independent Commission found to be problematic, shall we say. The Premier League obviously disagreed with them, said, no, you're 120.8 million, so you're over that 105 million threshold. Therefore, there's a case to answer. There's, you know, we found you to be in breach. The issue is that, and this is something that I think is a massive problem with the Premier League's profitability and sustainability rules, is that they are nowhere near as clearly defined as they need to be. So if you look at the EFL regulations, which are a lot more detailed, and I'm by no means an expert on these at all, but if you're going to get a points deduction, if that points deduction relegates you, it is suspended and applied to the following season. You cannot be relegated by a points deduction. There's no such stipulation in the Premier League. So this is the problem. And the other thing is if we'd have been hit with a points deduction before the 30th of June, that would have relegated us. So it would have been up to a month afterwards. But you've got to have an appeals process. That is a right under a tribunal. So we've got a situation where we submit our accounts in March, and before the end of that season, you need to get an entire hearing done on quite a complex case, and you've got to have an appeal hearing done as well. Now, the appeal, we've got 28 days to submit our appeal. And then the Premier League have 7 days to get back to us to tell us whether they're going to, the Independent Commission are going to form an appeals panel on that. So, you know, it's you cannot possibly hope to get these things done in that space of time from the 1st of March through to by the end of the season, sort of 28th of, it was the 28th of May, which is actually, I think, a bit later than usual, isn't it? So no, I don't think they were gaming that. But certainly, you know, if we, and I don't know if the Premier League have relegated us without giving us the benefit of an appeals panel, then all hell would have broken loose, because that's a serious procedural issue. If we are
Yeah.
punished to the extent
We'd
that
be going out with batons and balaclavas, I think. Yeah.
Well, this is the other thing. There's two things that really wind me up about this whole case. The first is we have been told by the Independent Commission that we have, through our 19.5 million overspend, achieved an indefinable and unquantifiable sporting advantage. Right? This is actually what they say in the report, and they refer to the EFL versus Sheffield Wednesday case. If you overspend and you break the upper threshold on profit and sustainability rules, you have an advantage. Now, it's not just over Leeds and Burnley. What they're saying is we have an advantage over every other club in the entire division, including Man City, including Liverpool, including Spurs, which is just absolute nonsense, frankly. But the thing that really annoys me is, if we'd have scored 6 more points in each of those 3 seasons, we wouldn't have been in PSR. We would have earned at least another 20 million extra in income. So if our sporting advantage had been bigger, we wouldn't have been in violation of PSR. Our problem is that we tried to compete and failed. It wasn't that. Do you know what I mean? Whereas if we tried to compete, if we'd overspent and it had worked, we wouldn't have been getting punished at all. Which kind
it's the
of
only industry in the world where you can't be capitalist, and actually you have some industry, as you'll know, you're not allowed to have a monopoly on certain things. But this is like anti-investment. You try and invest, as we've proven to do. We tried to better the club. We tried to do things, and we haven't gone OTT. And if it had worked, we'd have been fine. But it hasn't worked, and it's all very confusing. Martin, have you got anything to coming up?
It smacks of incompetence. It's only what Everton fans have been saying for the past 3 years, if not longer. It's for me, the club during this period was simply not run efficiently. They were taking unnecessary risks with fees and wages. Wages especially, our wage bill was absolutely through the roof at this point. Massively, one of the highest in terms of wages to income ratio in the Premier League. And it proves the Evertonians' point that the board was just not fit for purpose. There's a point in the Premier League report about the stadium costs, and they had been identified and not put down as an expenditure, the correct type of expenditure. Can't quite remember what it was meant to be down as now. But Denise Barrett-Baxendale actually emailed the Premier League, and it details that in the report, to try and move those costs. And Everton tried to do that within the time period, but the Premier League just weren't having it, and they just battered it away. And obviously that's one of the mitigating factors. But again, even that just smacks of incompetence from Everton's board and Everton's financial departments.
That's why we're in this mess. You both made fantastic points. I'm going to bring in a few points that I've found quite interesting. I feel we've had a treble sanction. I feel we had the points deduction, but we also were bound by a wage cap. We were also bound by having every single transfer over the last few seasons having to be approved by the Premier League. For me, that is not just one punishment, it's a multiple punishment. And it's something that they said with the penalty rule in football, and we will get you both on the show in the future for football, general football chats, which I'm sure you'd like to do. But they say you don't have a red card and you don't have a penalty, you don't have the double jeopardy. Well, Everton are having treble jeopardy. And then there's going to be a lot of prejudice moving forward about what we're doing this season, next season, because of the points. The whole thing stinks with regards to that. I've got another question in a moment. This relates to, let's touch base on the sanction itself then. And by the way, Mike, you made a fantastic point. You can't be relegated by points deduction in the Football League. That's fantastic. So talking about the sanction itself, do you think that they've gone with the 10 points now? I'll address this to Martin. I've got another question for you, Mike. Do you think they went for the 10 points, but ultimately they know it's going to end up being 6? And so this, when you're negotiating, you put your highest thing in, and you're going to end up, because we saw with Chelsea, they got a transfer ban and then I think it got suspended and never actually took place, or something happened with them. Is this the case if they push hard for one thing, knowing ultimately at some point it's going to get knocked down to 6?
It's a really good point, but I don't think that was in the thinking. I don't think they overinflate a judgment just because it might be reduced on appeal. I think they probably thought in their minds that that was a just sanction. But, I'm wondering where the actual sanction came from, because we've got a 41-page document that details everything possibly and almost had what they had for lunch on every single day. But then there's a short paragraph.
There's no actual process for sanctions, by the way, of, okay, 20 million equates to 10 points, 50 million equates to,
well, the EFL have a process, don't they? And it was like a 6-point deduction if you breach, and then it was another point for every 5 million that you over for the breach. So that would have been 10 million given those guidelines. But in the report, it says they're not going to be taking those guidelines into consideration. But yet they've done exactly what the EFL sanction would have been, or those guidelines were. It was a 10-point. They ended up with a 10-point deduction. But in the conclusion, I'm just not happy with the wording. I'm not happy that a detailed explanation was given of how they came up with the sanction, what justification they had for imposing that sanction. It just wasn't detailed enough for me, and it gives us no real indication of their thinking at that time. It just feels like they've put the finger in the air and said, well, 10 points sound about right.
They did mention the word deterrent, and that's why I think a lot of people have got angry. This is, for me, this is them making an example of Everton because we're a big club, we're in easy pickings, we're too nice, and they can come down on us and try and deter other clubs. But ultimately, I don't understand how you can have an industry where you're not actually allowed to try and better yourself, better your club. And the idea behind that is you're trying to protect the fans. Well, you've done the complete opposite, protecting the fans, protect the club, because ultimately the only people who are punished here are the Everton fans and the Everton players, because the board owner, they come and go, they can sell on, they can still make their money. And it's weird finished. And next season, of course, the club's going to be hit harder. We finish, I said on a space last night, I think Everton would have finished 12th or 11th this season comfortably, with what I've seen, that they're better than that bottom pack for sure. And that now possibly 10 points is the difference. For last season, it would have been the difference between 11th and 17th. Crystal Palace, 45 points, would have ended up on 35. They would have finished 17th. It's the difference between 8 places, 2 million a place. You're talking like, this could potentially cost Everton millions and millions of pounds and then knock on. So it's actually not a treble jeopardy, it's a quadruple jeopardy, in my opinion. I want to talk about something. They've talked about it possibly being reduced to 6 points. They've talked about it being possibly a transfer ban. In your opinion, Martin, would a transfer ban be worse if they said next summer you couldn't spend anything? Because we've got players leaving and you wouldn't be able to get your Dan Juma loan permanent. And could that be bad? Or could Everton have actually technically absorb a 10 points a season? Or would you take a transfer ban?
Oh my, what a question. 10-point deduction or transfer ban.
On this one.
Yeah, this is the hot topic. No, you know what? I think in the report once again, I think Everton wanted they were, I don't know if they were expecting, but they put forward maybe it should be a fine, maybe if it was a sanction it should be a fine, and perhaps a transfer ban. But I was hoping for a transfer ban. I'll be honest with you, in the January window.
You're not buying anyone anyway.
I know, exactly. Well, in the January window, I think we could have actually got away with it. I don't see a strengthening in the window anyway, whether it be from the loan market or a permanent transfer. So I was thinking if we could get away with a transfer ban for the January window, we've actually done pretty well. And we'll take a fine. We'll take that hit as well. I'm not sure how that would play into FFP in the future, but we would take that hit. If it was to be a transfer ban for the future, in terms of the summer, I would probably rather take a penalty deduction. I'm not saying 10 points, but a somewhat of a penalty deduction this season rather than a transfer ban next. I'm really hoping we can get that 10-point down. I think we can get that down to 6 points max. I think we'll do well this season with a 6-point deduction. We'll stay up, and then we can at least look to build next summer once we can rebuild within the summer transfer market.
I'd still argue that 6 points is utter ludicrous. I
would.
It's just
you don't see it going down to 3 or 0, do you?
No, it won't go. It'll go. It's the whole thing is unprecedented. The transfer ban could have been an option. They said they won't fine because we've got a wealthy owner, but they happily fine a football manager who's a multi-millionaire for his rude and unacceptable comments on which puts the game's integrity into jeopardy. They don't have any issue fining them rather than giving them a 10-match touchline ban. So I think with all things, they pick and choose what they want to enforce. I know Mike has made some very, very strong cases that it is probably all very legitimate. And I think our only case is to do with mostly how unfair this is and how angry this is. Now, the fans have rallied together. They've raised over £30,000 for flags and banners. I don't think a flag and a banner, I don't think they cost that much. There's going to be some surplus money. I hope we put it to good use with whatever we do. But one thing we're apparently doing is giving out cards to every single person who enters a stadium with the word corrupt. Mike, could this rub them up the wrong way? Could this go against us, or do you think this could really help support us and put things under scrutiny?
I don't think it can hurt us at all. We're football fans. If you're going to take 10 points off us, you've got to expect that there's going to be corrupt as fuck chants around a stadium full of 30,000 people. Okay? I mean, if you expect anything else to happen, you quite frankly don't understand the game, right? So no, I don't. I think the only thing that could possibly hurt us if it's things like, people throwing flares onto the pitch, running onto the pitch, obstructing the game. And I hope that we definitely don't see any of that, but that we make it a raucous cauldron of hate towards the Premier League on Sunday. But just coming back to the points deduction itself, so you've got this issue of fairness, right? So what are we talking about there? So we come back to these mitigating circumstances that Everton have offered, and there were 6 of them. So the Ukraine one, they kicked that out. They said this is a standard business risk. You can't legislate against things happening in the external environment, your political, economic shifts. These may have hit Everton particularly hard, but it was also the way that they put that case forward. They said, we've lost stadium investment. But that sponsorship, that naming rights money, we hadn't signed any deal with Usmanov, or with USM rather, on naming the stadium rights by March. There was no contract. Usmanov was banned from the UK 6 months before the invasion, which was around February. February was when I think it was February or maybe February, March 2022, when Ukraine was invaded. But our money dried up 6 months before that. If you remember, when Ancelotti left, we spent £1.5 million on. We got Damari Gray 1.5 million, and we brought in Andros Townsend and Salomon Rondon on a free. Right, this was a marked step change from the previous years.
So we knew what was going on, and we still.
Oh yeah, they knew what was going on. Putin was amassing troops on the Ukrainian border through the summer, so everyone sort of knew it was coming, and Usmanov would have known it was coming, and that's when we see our funds dry up, right? So, but the point was is they're saying we've lost naming rights, and that might have been worth 200 million. But that money wouldn't start filtering through until the stadium opened. So it would never have affected the period that we were talking about anyway, those 3 seasons.
Because what they were saying was that they had purchased the rights or something. But
so they purchased the naming rights. So, but we got that money and we never paid it back to Usmanov.
Yeah, okay, that you make a good point. Why?
The other thing, this may be a blessing in disguise, guys, because you've now got a fair value assessment. So where Etihad are paying way over fair market value for sponsorships, if we lost USM as a stadium sponsor, why couldn't we find another? Because they were paying way over the odds. There was no way any other company was going to come anywhere near what Usmanov was offering to put USM on the Everton stadium. It was a way of money to the club. So, and we could further down the line have been in serious trouble for that as well. So, but they've kicked it out. They've said, look, the reason, ostensibly, 6 different things. The player X was, Everton elected not to sue Gylfi Sigurdsson, right? That was their choice. They could have sued him. But the Premier League said, even in the instance that you did, there's no way that you could guarantee you got 10 million back. And that was comprised of the 5 million wages we had to pay him in his final year of his contract, plus around 5-6 million in amortization costs that we lost because he didn't play in that last year of his contract. He had a book value of around 6-8 million, and they wanted to sue him for that as well. So they just rounded it up. We lost about 10 million on this guy. But the Premier League said there's no level of certainty that you would have won that case. The guy was never even charged with anything. So like exactly what you said, Martin. What are you going to sue him for? It's just it was ridiculous. We then had these post-planning interest charges, and that came. So we've got two issues around planning charges. We've got the pre-planning permission, where because we hadn't got planning permission, nothing that we spent on the stadium could be capitalized in our accounts. And that was around 40 million, I think it was, 39 million. So early on in the report, we see all this stuff about Denise Barrett-Baxendale writing letters to the Premier League. And this actually worked. The Premier League gave a special dispensation that we would be able to, and I'll read you exactly what it says. The effect of this agreement on the 13th of August was that, subject to certain conditions, Everton would be able to exclude from its PSR calculation stadium expenditure that could not be capitalised before planning permission was granted. So Denise Barrett-Baxendale got that shit done. She should be given some credit for that. But also the Premier League, they were flexible with us on this. And we still went over. Even though we were able to claim that against stadium construction, we still went over. There's then, when it comes to October, we've then got this stuff about post-planning interest charges, right? So this is after we got planning permission. I think it was July 2022, was it, when we got, or was it? I can't remember. There's so many dates and figures going around in my head, I can't quite keep track of it. But Everton, basically, they had these, after they got planning permission, there was interest charges of 9.3 million. And Everton could have treated this as capital expenditure. And in that case, we would have reduced our losses before tax by 9.3 million.
Yeah.
But they didn't do this. This was an accounting error by Everton. They didn't.
And then we tried to retrospectively do it.
And then basically what they said is this is they said, we fucked up. We didn't put that down as capital expenditure. So that should be a mitigating factor. And they were like, well, that's not our problem. You cannot ask us to bail you out for not doing your job properly, which is kind of
that's where the incompetence comes in.
You're absolutely right, Martin. Absolutely right. And ostensibly, what they come to is it was the same with player Y. They're saying if they'd have left these price tags off, if they'd have just said player X caused us a loss, but didn't say the amount. If they then went and said player Y and all these other players we couldn't sell, this hurt us, that would have been a stronger argument. Because by putting a figure on it, the Premier League could come back and say, well, these are just hypothetical values that you're plucking out of thin air. There's no way that you can, with any level of certainty, say that you would have got these had we not had COVID.
What is your overall conclusion? Is that the mitigations are a load of rubbish? I personally don't quite get how the COVID one and the Sigurdsson, I think we have some slight there, with the war in Ukraine. I don't know how a business can have some allowances factored in. We need to, hang on. I, for example, wouldn't have an allowance for my business where I'd say, just in case there's a war in England, I've got to leave £2,000 extra. It's not how, I don't think it's in their thinking.
Right. Okay. Let me just come back on that, because that's exactly the point that the Premier League come back and reject it on. It's saying what they're saying is you didn't breach these regulations because of the war in Ukraine. You breached them because you were flying too close to the sun, and you were already massively over those spending budgets. And what all these different factors did was tip you over the edge. You had no risk management whatsoever. You were basically spending hemorrhaging money, exactly as Martin said. The sheer stupidity with which we were signing players on high contracts, on high wages on these contracts, and we weren't able to shift them on, and we were paying them too much. Look at Cenk Tosun. If he was on half the salary, he would have moved. He would have moved way before he got injured, before the Palace move, and he would have moved probably in the last year of his contract. But you put yourself in his shoes. He's saying, well, I'll just sit here on the 50 grand. I'll go on loan to Besiktas. Besiktas paid 30% of my wages, and Everton kicked me the other 70%. Why should I take a pay cut? That is that is not a mitigating circumstance. It's
And let's not
Okay.
pretend
serious-
Everton only. So I was going to say, let's not pretend Everton only lost 125 million over that period as well. There was a huge amount of loss, but those factors were mitigated. Everton are now trying to mitigate more to bring us under the threshold, but the losses were so much higher.
Yeah, but, and
What,
this is
what
the,
I think we're concluding is that because we've got an open forum, I'm conscious of time, is that we both agree the sanction is too high. However, the basis of this comes from gross incompetence and negligence and all the stuff we've been moaning about for years. This is the result of it. And one of them has passed away. One of the people culpable's passed away. One of them has been, we've got rid of them, and that is that. But it's just that's paying the price for it. And I want to come to some of the comments now, if that's okay, because I'm conscious I've kept up so much of your time. It's been a very intense stream. Martin, I want to ask you something here because I want to try and I don't know whether I can't really liven this up for you as your first show. It is intense. I'll probably see a side to you on this stream that I might not see on future streams because it is so important. I'm sure you want to talk about football really, but you did say you'd like to come on for this, so you're going to have to answer the tricky questions with our buddy Mike. Do the clubs? This was asked in the comments. Do they have a right to sue? Do these other clubs, Southampton, Leicester, Leeds, or are they all clutching at straws again and they're like the vulture where they see the pickings, we can have a piece of this pie? Have they got a case to stand on? Mike, you'll have your turn to say. I feel like Piers Bloody Morgan.
Yeah, I know. And it's the tough questions, isn't it? But you know what? I don't see us having a sporting advantage. I don't think this gives us a sporting advantage. The overspend. I think the overspend was again due to incompetence and a figure not getting put in the right column. I don't think that resulted in extra points for Everton in any particular season. I think again it was a commercial and financial mistake. But I don't see a sporting advantage. So I would be, if I was Burnley, I'd feel aggrieved. If the shoe was on the other foot, I would probably be calling them for everything, and I would want to sue, and I would want to go for everything that I possibly could. I also think those clubs now, with it being in the report to say they do have a possible case to sue Everton or to take their case further, they're not going to not to. They are definitely going to put a case in. If they've got a 2% chance of being successful, that's 2% better than zero. I say, in my opinion, they're sitting in their boardrooms preparing their case over the past few days. But in terms of did we have a sporting advantage, I would say no.
Is it more than, okay, forget the sporting advantage. Is it more to do with the fact their argument, this is to Mike, that it could be that we should have had the 10 points last season, which would have meant that Leicester wouldn't have got relegated? Is that more the basis of it? If you'd have sanctioned Everton previously, we wouldn't have been relegated this season, or if it was this year before, we wouldn't have been relegated this season. And then we can just say, well, it had to be this season because it would have been completely unfair last season, and we've had no sporting advantage. So we've got no case to answer. Mike, what's your opinion?
This is the crux of what everybody's really annoyed about. Is there's these two things. One is the severity of the penalty and the fact that there's no clear explanation on how the independent commission arrived at this specific figure, and I can come to that in a bit more detail in a minute. But the second thing is this issue of sporting advantage. Now, Martin, you're saying you don't think we got a sporting advantage from this, right? Okay, fine. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure. I'm not sure that we did. We've been shit for the last 2 seasons, right? We've been in relegation battles. How can that possibly?
But we'd have been more shit had we not had spent this money.
If you take the 19.5 million, I looked at this the other day. Right, let's have a look at. They're saying they can't quantify the sporting advantage. So they're saying we had 19.5 million extra because we went over that amount between July 2019. And the 30th of June 2022, right? We signed Fabian Delph in July 2019, and his contract ran out 3 years later on June the 30th, 2022. He played probably about 30 games for us, no goals, no assists, spent most of the time, and his transfer fee and wages came to just over 20 million. So do you know what I mean? Is that the sporting advantage we got by overspending by that 20 million? I don't know. But what specifically they're saying is they cannot quantify this, right? They cannot quantify the sporting advantage, but this is not a bad thing, because what they've also said on the day that they released this report, David Phillips KC released a statement saying that he had rejected requests from 5 Premier League clubs to join their case to the Premier League and pursue Everton over their violations of PSR. He said this would be completely, totally unacceptable. And what he's then said is that if those clubs want to pursue and get any compensation, that they have to apply separately to the commission, and that the commission will determine the level of compensation that they are owed. Right? So this is not about suing us in open court. Burnley are going, if Burnley want to sue us in a civil court because they think that we are 100% responsible for their relegation in 2022, then they are going to have to open their books up, and they are going to have to put a case together showing that we're 100% responsible for that. We played Burnley twice in that season. They won 1, we won 1. What did for Burnley? If you look at their records, they actually had the lowest budget in the Premier League, but they were, by all accounts, an absolute maximum. They were 30 million over on PSR. They'd made losses of 30 million. So if Burnley really wanted to do it, Burnley could have spent another 30 million on top of that without getting into PSR violations.
Yeah, we could sue them for not spending the money and still getting relegated.
This is what I'm saying.
Could have had Michael Keane.
What got them relegated was that they chose not to pay. And listen to this. This is, I'm hoping they take this to court, because we've got a potential for a scenario where Everton, Burnley come into court and they say, we're suing you because we went down because you got an unfair sporting advantage by spending 20 million over the maximum losses allowed. And then what will happen is Everton will come up and they say the defence calls its first witness, Mr. Sean Dyche, who was fired by Burnley 6 games before the end of the season. And Dyche gets up on the stand and he says, no, the reason they got relegated is because they didn't give me any fucking money to spend, and they fired me 6 games before the end of the season and only got 7 points. That's why they went down. There's millions of other factors in there. Millions of other factors. You cannot reduce it to this one variable. And that's why the independent commission have said this is not quantifiable. If you cannot quantify it, you cannot put a price on it.
I agree. That's a very interesting point.
They've set it up so it has to go through an arbitration, and those clubs will not be able to pursue any further anything other than the compensation that's awarded to them.
Yeah.
So we might
Premier League
pay, but it's not going to be. We're not going to be. They're not going to award them 300 million, or they're not going to award them that amount. It's just a nonsense.
We were not responsible for them being shit. I think what they could argue is that we've had maybe some sporting advantage. We think we haven't, or that the Premier League could have given us the sanctions last season, which would have meant that we would have gone relegated, and Leicester, I think, would have stayed up. So they could say, why wasn't it done last season? But then we've got the counter argument. It has to have an appeals process. I personally think the sanction should be a transfer ban or a 3-point suspension, and it should be suspended till the start of next season. I think to impose us on it now it's all very, very cruel and unjust. Because we've got 100 people watching, I want to make an open forum now. If you can stick with me for another 10 minutes, I know this stream's gone on a while, but if you don't mind, if you've got somewhere to be, you're happy to go to the comments and
that's
okay.
fine.
Peter says, how could those 3 clubs prove in court beyond reasonable doubt that our financial misconduct contributed to the relegation more than their own mistakes? I think Mike has kind of answered that question. Are you happy with that, Mike? Can't hear you, Mike.
They can't prove that in court. This is the thing. There's no way on earth that they can prove that 20 million that we spent over a maximum loss threshold is what led to them their underperformance. There's too many other factors involved. So
Martin, Mike is Thanks, Mike. Martin saying we're the third lowest net spenders in the Premier League in the last 5 years. We're showing signs of atonement, but that didn't go in our favour, did it at all? We didn't get any credit really for that.
No, not at all. I think there was a number of things in the report to say the trend was better, and we'd lost the majority of the money in the early part or the early start of that phase, that period. But lowest net spenders in the Premier League in the last 5 years. I mean, we're probably feeling. I feel like we're coming out of this. I feel like we haven't spent a huge amount of money lately, but the squad is in a better place than it was probably 3 years ago. And that's when we were spending a lot of money, and 4 years ago. But I feel like we're getting to this phase of a stronger squad, albeit not spending a huge amount of money. And I think that's probably a bit of a nod to Kevin Thelwell and the work he's been doing since he came to the club.
Yeah, some positive signs. Thanks, Martin. Mr. Blue Skies also says about the Manchester 215 allegation. I don't think we can touch base on that today. I think we'll have to come back to that. Peter says Marcel Brands claims he warned both Mashiri and Ancelotti with regards to the James Rodriguez signing, and that he offered much financially, much safer. Do we think that Martin Mashiri is very much, look at me, I bought the football club to show off. I couldn't do anything at Arsenal. They didn't want me. I'm now at Everton. I can do this. I can do that. I can be the big I am in his posh circles. Is there a case of that with James and really didn't really think of the bigger picture like Mike likes to do, which is actually we have to make the small steps in a safe way?
Absolutely. Mashiri is Hollywood. He even quoted Hollywood in 2016 when he took over. He wanted Everton to be more Hollywood, and he wanted a big manager to stand on the touchline, just like the Northwest managers, Klopp and Mourinho at that time, and Guardiola. And that's why he went for Ronald Koeman, because he saw him as a Hollywood signing. So I think that's been the case throughout Mashiri's time at Everton. I heard the other day David Moyes being interviewed to say he was lined up once again to become Everton manager, and he was probably 24 hours away from signing the contract. But Carlo Ancelotti became available. So again, Mr. Hollywood, we had to have the Hollywood signing. So thought went out the window, rationale went out the window, and then Carlo Ancelotti came in and stood on the sidelines because it was Hollywood. And I think that's been if there's one word you could say about Farhad Mashiri's reign, there's a lot of words that come to mind. Unfortunately, Hollywood was one of them.
Yeah, as Dave Thomas says, he paid too much attention to Sherbakken. It's an open forum now, so if you want to get your comments in, I know there's been hundreds of them, but because it booted me out, made me refresh a lot of them. I can only see about from the last 10 minutes. So if you've got questions to our wonderful panel tonight, Martin and Mike, I think you two have been absolutely brilliant, to be fair, and you've brought some really good points. I think this stream has been absolutely top class, and I think if you're watching and you haven't subscribed already, you should absolutely do so and smash the like button. And you can see both these wonderful chats on Twitter. They are their handles. Damien says the same commission that gave us a 10-point deduction is the same commission that is going to hear the compo claims against us. How can that be allowed?
Right, so that is the case. So they are going to be the ones, I think, that adjudicate on any compensation levels. But the appeal will not be the same panel. There will be a different panel to hear our appeal. But as I said earlier, the most important thing we've got to recognise here is when you look at the report, this issue of whether we had a sporting advantage or not, it comes from and you won't believe, I mean, this just turns my head inside out, how this has all sort of come about. So this might take a minute or so to go through, but it's getting to this point, is that that definition of a sporting advantage is not what we mean when we say a sporting advantage. When we say a sporting advantage, it means that we had some extra benefit that allowed us to do better than other teams. When this commission is saying that Everton, there was a sporting advantage was inferred purely by the fact that we exceeded the maximum spend, the maximum losses allowed under PSR. So just because if we'd have gone £1 over, we would have still have been deemed to have had a sporting advantage. what that sporting advantage is cannot be quantified, and they go to great lengths to state this in the judgment. So, and the reason for this is that the Premier League have got to be very careful here, because if the consequences of us breaking PSR are that we get relegated and go into administration, then the punishment actually inflicts upon us exactly the scenario it is designed to stop happening. I mean, the whole purpose of PSR is to ensure the responsible financial management of clubs. So if it was to cause a major problem, then for Everton and force us, relegated, and then we can't pay for the stadium and we can't pay our day-to-day costs. We get the parachute payments, but we can't get rid of the players because we haven't got relegation release clauses and all this type of stuff, and we end up going into administration. Then that is basically all the evidence you will ever need that we need an independent regulator of English football. They were completely cocked up. So when they've come up with this definition of a sporting advantage, and they relate it to the EFL case against Sheffield Wednesday that states any club that overspends just by virtue of overspending is deemed to have a sporting advantage over all the other teams in the league, although this sporting advantage cannot be quantified. Okay? But in doing that, what they also do is they make it practically impossible for any clubs to come in and put a figure on it. Burnley come and sue us. Sorry, that sporting advantage that Everton had cannot be quantified, and here's the compensation that we believe that you deserve. It might be 2-3 million, might be 10 million, something like that. We don't know. For Leeds, it can only be 2 million. If we finished below them, they would have risen one place, and Burnley would have risen another place. Burnley would have not been relegated, perhaps, but Leeds would only have risen one place. That would have been worth an extra 2 million to them. So the only case Leeds have got is for about 2 million quid. Burnley are going to try and say that they were relegated because of us.
Yeah,
that is very, very difficult. That's very, very difficult, if not impossible. They might get.
Is it not black and white that if we'd have not the sporting, there's no way that the sporting advantage could be quantified to the point where you could say that absolutely we would have been relegated and Burnley would, that's bollocks. But if they'd have said that we should have had the 10 points deduction in that same season, then obviously we would have gone down and Burnley would have stayed up. I can understand that, but that's impossible. They're both implausible arguments.
They are. They're absolutely. I mean, there's no way on earth, unless you've got a time machine, that we could have had that points deduction in that season. It's utterly impossible because we don't submit the accounts till the following year, and then you've got to go through the whole rigmarole of having the independent commission and an appeals process. So it's never going to happen within that year. But I mean, but this is the point that really just sort of just completely turns my head inside out, is that the Premier League doesn't really have any kind of recommended guidelines on how to calculate points deductions, right? And actually, if you look at the report, Richard Masters, in section 7 of his testimony, which is not available for us to see, but it says this in the adjudication, that on the 10th of August 2023, the Premier League board passed new guidelines for a formula to calculate points deductions for PSR violations. What it said was that if you get if you violate PSR, it's an instant automatic 6-point fine, and then 1 point extra for every 5 million that you are over. Right now, the independent commission, the 3 guys sitting on the panel, they said this was clarified in October at the pre-trial hearing on the 4th of October, that the Premier League didn't give them this formula to tell them how to do their job. Otherwise, they wouldn't be independent, right? So they said it was just a suggestion. We're just suggesting that you could use this formula that we have now approved. And then
how many points would we have got under that formula?
We would have got exactly 10. This is the other thing. That formula gives us the penalty that we would have got. But it gets weirder than this.
Well, if they put that formula on other clubs, because I think there's going to be other clubs that are going to get
the guidelines. Because in the regulations, those guidelines are not in the regulations. They're just guidelines. It's like a sentencing guideline. You know, if you're convicted of manslaughter, you can get life in prison. But not everybody who's convicted of manslaughter gets that. They're just giving sentencing guidelines basically on the severity. So, but the QC, David Phillips QC, the head of the independent commission, in this report, he comes back and he says, we are not going to use this formula. We are going to calculate we're going to calculate the deduction based on different factors, based on the severity, based on the unfair sporting advantage that it gave Everton, that is the unquantifiable sporting advantage, and also as a deterrent to make sure that other clubs do not try and go over the PSR limit. But remember that they cited the EFL for this sporting advantage definition. So I went and had a look at that document. I went and had a look at that judgment, EFL versus Sheffield Wednesday. The first thing that struck me was really interesting is that the EFL's lawyer in that case is our lawyer in this case, right? So he was the one that was prosecuted. He was on the other side of the fence against Sheffield Wednesday. They were initially given a 12-point deduction, and that was reduced to 6 points on appeal. But, and this is a fascinating thing, so you remember earlier the Premier League wanted 12 points?
Yeah.
That's because their whole case is around following that case, that EFL versus Sheffield Wednesday. So they said, you know, there's an automatic 12-point deduction for PSR violations in the EFL. So they said Everton should get hit with 12 points. So I think that's where that 12-point figure came from. But in the EFL, in the Premier League, their guidelines say 6 points plus, and then they add on little bits. In the EFL, they give you 12 points, but they take away stuff for how extensively you were over. So if we look at the EFL guidelines, so remember, under the Premier League guidelines, we get 10 points. Under the EFL, we would have got 12 points, but we would have had 6 points taken off immediately because we were only 18.5% over the 105 million. And then we would have had another 2 points taken off because we had showed that we had improved our PSR position from over those 3 seasons. It got better and better and better.
Okay, so the point is,
we would have under their system, we would have got 4 points. Under their guidelines, we would have only got a 4-point thing. And
because 8 points are deducted. 8 points are deducted immediately because it's a percentage over.
So 6 points would have come off because we were 19.5 million over 105 million. That comes to 18.27%. I think it was the figure. So in the EFL system, that would equate to a 6-point deduction straight off the bat. So 12 points minus 6, and then minus another 2 because we'd improved our situation year on year through those 3 years. From 2019, 2020, then it got better, and then it got better again. So under the EFL system, you know, if they're referring to that case as precedent and they're plucking out the sporting advantage, but then they're not following any of the sort of guidelines that were given there. Sheffield Wednesday were given a 12-point fine, but their situation got worse and worse each year. So their situation was far more serious than ours. They were spending 168% of their income on player wages by the third season. I mean, they were hemorrhaging money. They had to sell their stadium to cover the costs of the wages of the players. That's what the whole case was about. So we've got this situation where they're saying we're not going to use the Premier League formula, but under that formula, it would have come up with 10 points. And, we've come up with 10 points as well, but we're not going to tell you how we calculated it. I mean, this is just a horseshit nonsense. And the other thing that absolutely cracked me up was that the Premier League are the ones that cited the EFL versus Sheffield Wednesday case as the precedent, right? And this is some peak barrister shithousery because their lawyer, Adam, what's his name, has basically come in and cited a case that our lawyer was in charge of prosecuting in order to get us screwed for a stiffer penalty. But you know, and I think this is what we're going to see them challenged on, is that if they're going to be citing EFL and they're going to be looking at that, then our penalty is 3 to 4 times. Well, it's at least double. We would have got 4 points under the EFL system, I think, if we'd have followed it to the letter. Under the Premier League, we get 10. But we have to appeal on procedure. We cannot appeal on any of these other issues. And it's exactly the same for these clubs that are going to sue us. You look at the way that independent commission has responded to our mitigating circumstances. If Burnley are going to go in there and say, well, if they got a sporting advantage of 10 points, they would have been relegated. The commission's just going to say, no, that 10 points isn't the sporting advantage. That 10 points is largely because of the severity of their breach and to act as a deterrent to other clubs. So you don't think that they got 10 extra points because they spent 20 more million. And, we don't think that they're just going to say it's not quantifiable. So actually, having that same commission in place, I think it's an advantage for us, because I think it's going to massively limit any compensation that can be paid to any of those clubs. And I think only Leeds Burnley have a chance. Leeds maybe a couple of million, absolute max. Burnley maybe a little bit more, but I'm not sure. And I think what we need to do is we need to have a policy that comes in that says, if you overspend on PSR, you will get a transfer ban and you will get a points deduction. But that points deduction only applies if you finish 17th or higher in the league. If you finish in the relegation places, you get relegated, right? But if you finish, they'll say, we'll give you a points deduction of 10, but it can only relegate you down as far as 17th. But they also maybe give you 20th place in terms of merit payments. So
then we'd be happily spending 100 million over on 2 world-class players, knowing there's nothing bad that can happen because we can only finish 17th in a future season.
But if let's say you get a 2-year transfer ban, I think that would be a far greater disincentive to exceed the 105 million than points deductions, because points deductions you can appeal. But if you said, right, we'll give you a transfer ban and we will give you a points deduction, but that points deduction cannot relegate you. I think that's an important thing. You cannot punish the club and you cannot punish the fans for the sins of the owners. And that is the one thing that would. I think we could all live with being sort of knocked down at the table and finishing in 17th if that was the worst case scenario. But I think that would be a much better disincentive. 1 year transfer ban, 2-year transfer ban, and then a points deduction but one that's guaranteed that you won't be relegated. Yeah. If you get relegated anyway, but do you know what I mean? If you get relegated anyway, then that's not a problem. But
absolutely brilliant. And I think what Peter was actually talking about was whether they could be the same people doing the same job, and is there a conflict of interest? Could there be some brown envelopes there? We'll get Everton punished so that we've got a case to answer now, and therefore then you'll see. I think there could be a thought that that's something dodgy coming on. Andy is saying, why are Southampton and Forest in the mix? Martin, have you got anything on that?
Absolutely no ideas why Southampton and Forest were in the mix. I don't see it affecting them unless I'm wrong. But are they just jumping on a bandwagon here? They possibly could have been dragged into the mix. Southampton went down without with a whimper, really. Yeah, I'm not too sure about them ones. To be honest with you, the majority of the clubs, I don't think I've got a case anyway, apart from Burnley, as Mike said. So I think the rest of them are just along for the ride.
And this one for you, Martin. Dave said, as I have said, the Premier League for me is corrupt. After Scudamore said Man City won't win 3 Premier Leagues in a row. VAR was introduced. Liverpool won the league. He left and got a 5 million handshake.
Look, we can spin anything, can't we? To justify our argument. You know what I do like? We haven't really talked about, the fans' efforts. You touched upon it earlier, Ryan, the fans raising £30,000. It's almost just shy of £40,000 now. I just refreshed the page.
Wow.
And a bit of shithousery. Just any post that the Premier League are putting on Twitter at the moment or social media, I just love the pages after page of the corrupt Premier League badge being posted after every single Premier League post. Go on one Premier League post, scroll down, and you will just see Everton fans on and on and on and on.
I did it.
It's not going to get us anywhere. It's not going to.
It's
The Premier League bigwigs are not shaking at the thought of that happening on social media. But it's fueling our spirit, and I think it's Everton fans. All Everton fans are buying into this now, and the atmosphere this weekend against Manchester United, it's going to be fierce. And I can't wait. I can't wait to see all stands of Goodison Park with those banners.
Yeah,
I'm going to take one,
and I can't wait.
I'll be there on Sunday. I also I know Chris Kavanagh, the VAR, so I could drop him a little text and say, let him know that I'm watching every move he's doing on the VAR. No, in all seriousness, I couldn't do that. That would be unprofessional of me. But it's a massive game, Man United. We'll be doing a match preview on Friday. So if either of you have got nothing better to do, then you're more than welcome to join us for some more a light-hearted show where we talk about how Everton are going to absolutely annihilate Manchester United.
It's
still
tense atmosphere. It's going to be brilliant. I can't
wait.
Be a
bit. This is from Steph. Steph says, surely we can show our sanction is disproportionate to FA past sanctions. The fact that no sanction guidelines were in place at the start of the hearing shows the kangaroo court nature of our penalty. I think that is something that Mike and Martin have already addressed and agree with you on. Peter says they've got to prove beyond reasonable doubt we had a sporting advantage based on the mistakes those three clubs made themselves. Emma's saying, although Mike is convinced the conflict of interest will have no effect on the KC's decision, surely the fact that there is one should not be allowed.
I don't think there is a conflict of interest in a technical, legal way. I don't think that there is a conflict of interest.
Yeah.
No, I don't think there is. There's no way that his working for Leeds 15 years ago has any bearing on this case.
I agree. Maybe they're talking about the compensation. They got us 10 points deduction, and then now they're fighting for the people who are going to benefit financially from it. So it would have been in those clubs' best interest for Everton to get the points deduction, because then it allows them to have the case where they can then sue for massive amounts of compensation. So they could say there's some dodgy stuff. But these were wealthy people anyway. I'm pretty sure they don't need to be.
If he was a QC or KC that was on a general retainer, so for example, Leeds pay him X amount of money every year just to be their go-to guy on legal advice and what have you, then that would definitely be a conflict of interest. But as far as I understand, those types of arrangements were done away with a long time ago. You have solicitors on retainer, but not barristers anymore. So I don't think that that's going to be an issue. However, if Everton's legal team think it is, then they should definitely raise it, no question. But I don't think we're in a position to say whether there is a conflict of interest. We just don't have enough. We just don't know. But I think Everton fans.
I think Everton fans in general just don't believe in coincidences. So is it simply a coincidence where the Premier League panel came up with 10 points and then the Independent Commission said, well, we don't believe in that, but we'll give you 10 points, as you said, Mike. So, is it a coincidence? It's hard to believe.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. I've made so many notes here on things you guys have said and want to follow up on in the future. But Bob says, let me put it another way. The Premier League deciding for the commission, I'll call it. That alone, it's not independent. The court needs to be fully constituted insofar as lead independent court. Tommy saying, I hate to say this, but this is classic fitting us up. Wunderlust is saying, past a certain point of points deduction, a team may as well forfeit the whole season because they're over anyway. If what we did deserves 10, you can see this was short-sighted by the PL. Emma says, so if it's purely for a decision coming now and not last season, they only have grounds to sue the PL. Otherwise, where does it end? And when it comes to City's sporting advantages, Eugene says Portsmouth got a sports points deduction and they dropped down the leagues. There's loads of comments here. I don't think we can go on all night, though. Joey's talking about the Saudis. Bob's saying, Mike Gow, I can't tell if your views so black and white are the Premier League or your own. You seem to regurgitate what the PL states to deny our adjustments. What about if the law is an ass?
You're right. But it's not the law. This is not a league. This is not the law. This is Premier League regulations. This is why we need an independent regulator of football, because the Premier League have written up these regulations that allow the independent commission to do whatever they want, up to and including kicking us out of the Premier League. And they don't have to come up with any explanation of how they've arrived at that penalty. You know, I'm not trying to come down on the side of the Premier League here. What I'm trying to say is that it's very, very clear why they've rejected our mitigating claims. And actually, when you read through that report, if you read it in detail, they're pretty much saying exactly what most Everton fans have been saying for the past 4 or 5 years, is that this is a absolutely shockingly run club that has taken far too many risks, and we've gotten ourselves into a mess. That's what they're saying caused us to breach the regulations, and that's why we've got this 10-point deduction. The question is we've got to challenge them on the basis of procedure. We've got to challenge them on procedure. Have they arrived at this in a clear and transparent way? And I think the answer to that question is no. And if that's the case, we have definitely got grounds for appeal. And also, we can apply on the severity of the sanction. If you can only get 9 points for going into administration, 10 points for spending more money than you've got coming in a single year, or over in a P&L in 3 12-month accounting periods, that doesn't, you know, if you've got $1 billion in the bank and then you earn 100 million but spend 120, you spend 205 million, you're in breach of BR violation, but you've still got 895 million left in the bank. Your club's still in an incredibly healthy position, but you violated profit and sustainability regulations. This is the problem.
But you're all a pack of shite.
So I'm trying to understand it so that I can try and understand what's maybe going to happen next. And if you want to know what's going to happen next, we've got 28 days to get the appeal in. The Premier League has to respond within 7 days, setting that appeal date and appointing that appeals commission panel. And then we will go through that appeals process, and we will see what's going to happen. And that has to happen before the end of this season. Because if we get relegated...
when are we going to see this appeal?
Sorry?
When will we see this appeal?
I think it's going to be around February, March, something like that. February, March. It can't take too long, because if it goes past March, let's say it goes past the end of March, that's relegation battle zone time, right? April and May. If we've got this hanging over of us and we're in the same situation we've been in for the last 2 seasons, that puts us at a distinct sporting disadvantage because of the stress and pressure associated with the relegation battle. And if they are going to, if there's any chance of us getting that appeal reduced, that sanction reduced, this needs to happen this season. It can't go on beyond that, because otherwise we get relegated. Say we get relegated by 2 points, and then they cut our, in July or August next year, then they give us, say, well, 10 points, we'll cut it to 6 points. 4 points, we would have stayed up. What are they going to do? Give us 4 more points in the championship? I mean, do you see what I mean? So this is going to be resolved within the next 2 to 3 months, I would say.
Yeah, it has to be appealed. Yeah, it has to be seen this season, doesn't it? But wouldn't it be the case where the 10-point deduction is being taken off immediately? Wouldn't it be the case of they would have had to do that after the appeal?
Yes.
Wouldn't that be a more sensible approach?
That's what Ian Byrne is calling for. Is until we've had the right of appeal heard, to see if we, can contest that sanction in any way we can. That 10 points should not be applied until that appeal is heard, right?
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, agreed.
That is the actual core of what Ian Byrne is taking into the Commons to debate. Yes.
And will he win? And what happens if everyone passes that?
I don't think he can win, can he? But what they can do is that could put significant. I mean, this is the other thing: is that putting significant external pressure on. I think what's going to come out of this is massive. I think the Premier League have basically shot themselves, not in the foot, they've shot themselves in the head in terms of resisting attempts to establish an independent regulator of English football. I think it's pretty much game over for them. There's going to be some independent regulator come in. The only discussion to have is the extent of the powers that it has. And that's what's going to be thrashed out in Commons over the next 12 months. but I don't know. Parliament can't force the Premier League to do anything here. But the Premier League, and there's a thread that I put on Twitter. I'll try and find it and maybe post it in the comment. Is if you try and look at this from the Premier League's point of view, they've got a very delicate balancing act here. They have got to show that they're tough on PSR violations so that they can regulate themselves. But they've also got to not fuck a Premier League club so badly that they end up going into administration. And they've also got to do it in a way that protects, that doesn't piss off the other clubs that feel that they've, the Burnleys and Leeds that feel that they've got some sort of grievance. So they're trying to balance all these things, and they can't do it because they're an interested party themselves. They're just trying to protect their ability to maintain control and self-police themselves, right? So they've got almost, it's what you call a trilemma, right? They can punish us and they can give out loads of compensation, but then that screws Everton. They can punish us in a way that maybe isn't as severe, and raises questions about how they regulate themselves. What they can do is that they've got 3 things they need to do, but they can only have 2 of them at any one time. There's no way that they can get all 3.
Yeah.
But if they'd have given us a 6 point, I think that would have been the Goldilocks deduction. I think we would have still appealed it, right? But I don't think everybody would have been that outraged. But 10 points is just too much. They've totally gone beyond. They totally overshot this, basically, and they've shot themselves in the head as far as staying independent. So,
and you'd love to be a fly on the wall of the Premier League's officers this week
to
hear the reaction
absolutely.
of the world.
Yeah. Yeah, they'll just be sitting there thinking, "Game over, man. We completely,
fucked another one.
Fucked this up." But I do not envy them.
Yeah. And on that bombshell, I can only thank you both, you guys, enough, because over 100 people watching throughout live. I'm sure we'll have hundreds of views back of people. This has been a fantastic show. I mean, the amount of notes and stuff I learned, and Martin, your opinions were fantastic. Mike, you've brought some wonderful insight that I think me and Martin possibly wouldn't have been able to have picked up just from ourselves, and from you've given another dimension to this debate, and I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. I mean, I just explained that is kind of like my job is sort of looking at football policy and things like this, so we're a little bit familiar with that. But this hasn't.
Well, I asked you to come on, boss.
So, well, you see, you picked the right people, but it's the amount of discussion that we've had going on since about 10 o'clock Friday morning. I mean, I haven't been off Twitter, and there's so many engaged Evertonians having discussions on different things. Is it unfair? What about, should we go back with mitigating circumstances? I mean, my understanding of this is not something I've come up with myself. It's been in dialogue with, loads of other Everton fans highlighting key points that really, I wouldn't have picked up on in reading these things. So, these forums that you're running, Ryan, follow Everton, sort of long Twitter threads, even having discussions with lots of other content creators, it's absolutely critical, especially at this point. And I think the worst thing, the thing that they're going to regret the most, is the sheer volume that Everton fans are going to be demonstrating how livid and how much of an injustice this is until this gets resolved in a way that we feel is fair and right. We're not going to turn down the volume until that's given to us, basically. So
us versus them.
Martin, have you got any closing words?
I would just say us versus them. I don't care. Really, it doesn't matter what happens between now and March or February, because it's we can't influence anything right now. The only thing that we can do is make Goodison Park an absolute bear pit, and just keep pressuring the Premier League and showing them exactly how we feel as a fan base. I think if we do that between now and February, March, that will go some way to maybe getting a fairer sanction for the breach. But us versus them, that's all I have to say.
If we continue with this monumental effort, we bring in all the placards, we bring in the flares, the balaclavas and the snipers, you can rest assured that the Premier League will almost certainly give us a 50-point deduction every season for the next 10 years until we're playing in the conference Southwest Division against the likes of Widnes Town. And on that bombshell, I'd like to thank Mr. Gow and Martin for joining me on this fantastic stream. I'm sure you can appreciate it's been 2 hours. We're normally done and dusted within 45 minutes, unless it's one of Mabsy's infamous streams. Only a little joke at Mabsy because he's in the comments. I do hope to bring both of these wonderful pundits back on very soon. Actually, be honest with you, Martin has been in touch with me. He wants to get involved with the channel, and we would love to bring him back on for the Man United preview to give a little bit more of an opportunity to have a bit of fun, because this was very intense. But Martin, you were fantastic. And Mike, I've actually been on at Jan for a number of months. Where's Mr. Gow? Where's Mike? Mike. Can you get Mike on? Could you get Mike on? Could you get Mike on? He's made some excuses for you. As I know, you've had a few things going on, but I'm glad I finally got you on a stream, and I really hope you can be our go-to guy.
I'll always find time for if there's something I can contribute to the discussion. And I think, unfortunately, this is something that I can actually give maybe a valuable perspective on. But a lot of the rest of the time, maybe not. There's other people way more engaging to get on talking about things like football policy.
Well, I would like to appoint you, Mike, as chief head of Follow Everton business, stadium projects, business, board, all that sort of technical stuff that most of us absolutely suck at, because I think your insight is absolutely wonderful. And Martin, I'd like you to appoint you as head of bringing rainbows to Goodison Park, because I noticed just behind your wonderful setup, by the way, you've got the rainbow, and I really hope that is a pot of gold equating to at least £19.5 million at the end of that rainbow, and possibly a magic envelope that we can hand to the Premier League to get some of these points chalked off. The list of points you guys made are absolutely incredible regarding the appeal. The recent one you said about if it goes on too late, it will add stress and pressure on the relegation battle and could unfairly influence on the pitch performance. I think that's really important. And we'll be back talking about football on Friday, which is why we're here. Talking about Everton versus Manchester United. As I say, if either of you want to come on, that'd be great. Thank you so much. I just want to read out these comments. Peter said, Martin, Mike, thank you so much. And Stuart is also saying, thanks, Ryan and Guest. Very interesting live stream. Bravo. I think it's been widely accepted as a wonderful stream. So, guys, thank you so much. We're going to cut it there.
Cheers, Ryan.
Nice. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. Let's run the banner.